miracles will happen as we speak. No, we're never gonna survive unless we get a little crazy. No, we're never gonna survive unless we get a little crazy. In a world full of people, only someone to fly. Ain't that crazy? In a heaven of people, only someone to fly. Ain't that crazy? No, we're never gonna survive Why do birds suddenly appear every time you are near? Just like me, they long to be close to you. Why do stars fall down from the sky every time you walk by? Just like me, they long to be close to you. Why do birds suddenly appear every time you are near? Just like me, they long to be close to you. Why do stars fall down from the sky every time you walk by?
Inner Stars, and this may be the last video I do on the red balloons because we solved it. And this information could be the information that could actually put me in danger. Now, this took a lot of digging and a lot of research. We had to trust the Holy Spirit. We had to trust what we were seeing repeated in the media, television shows, movies, their signs, their black magic, their sorcery, showing us what they're going to do before they do it. And only the truth will set you free. And after all that, after weeks and weeks of finding this stuff and knowing that we were onto something and not giving in to the critics, we've arrived at the Holy Grail of the red balloons. Now, before I get into this, I've got to set the stage, because this article appeared after lots of research. This is the Serratia marcescens, the miracle bacillus. It is from the bacillus family, which means it is a bacteria, and it causes what appears to be blood on bread. Now, throughout history, and I'm going to link this article in the description, they would attribute this to a miracle, saying that this was the blood of Christ. Because remember, Christ said, "This is my body." And as this bacteria appeared, they began to believe back in history that it had to do with the blood of Christ. The first time it appeared was in the 6th century BC. And it went on throughout history. There were several popes that claimed it as a miracle. But let's get into the meat of what this is about. Because the United States government this red bacteria, they launched in balloons. Yes, the red bacteria that appears on bread was launched in balloons, and these are the 99 red balloons. Let's read about this, and it made people sick. Serratia is an opportunistic pathogen that strikes the weakened body. Spelled out right there in black and white. Biologists once thought that S. marcescens was a non-pathogenic, and because of the pigment it produces, it was used widely to trace bacterial transmission. Since 1906, physicians used the bacteria to study how epidemics get started because this bacterium generally was considered to be harmless. But in the 1950s, the U.S. Army conducted a study called Operation Sea Spray to study wind currents that might carry biological weapons. They filled balloons with this bacteria, this red bacteria. These are the red balloons from the 1950s. And burst them over San Francisco just to see where the harmless red bacteria would land. However, shortly thereafter, doctors noted a drastic increase in pneumonia and urinary tract infections. Only since the 1960s did microbiologists recognize that this bacteria as an opportunistic human pathogen. In the hospital, it tends to colonize the respiratory and urinary tracts of adults rather than the gastrointestinal tract. This is a bacteria that causes illness. They burst the red balloons over San Francisco. Ever wonder why the Golden Gate Bridge is not gold at all, but painted red? Serratia causes 2% of nosocomial infections of the bloodstream, lower respiratory tract, urinary tract, surgical wounds, and skin and soft tissue of adult patients. Outbreaks of this bacterial meningitis, wound infections, and arthritis have occurred in pediatric wards. In most cases, the infections have occurred in people who have compromised immune system or who are aged. Although most of the strains are harmless in the soil, a few have been reported in 2011. In 6 hospitals, the Alabama Department of Public Health has investigated the outbreak of cases of this bacteria due to contaminated catheters. So there you have it. The 99 red balloons. Now, how does this fit into today? Well, we know that NASA launched 50 balloons during the eclipse, and we know that that was some kind of a ritual pointing back to the 99 red balloon song from 1984. Let me tell you how insidious that this could possibly be. UV light kills 99.9% of bacteria. When are UV light levels lower? During an eclipse. That is when the maximum number of bacteria will survive in the upper stratosphere. And maybe that is why NASA launched these balloons during the eclipse, not to study the mutations, which is what we originally thought, but to allow for the maximum number of these bacteria to survive. And we know that this is probably all linked in to now. So now that we're armed with the truth, we can all keep our eye out for this. And I will be digging deeper into this pathogen, the Serratia. This is unbelievable, you guys. The red balloon solved. And for those of you that put your entire trust in our military, NASA, and everyone else that is in power and control, I got sad news for you. As recently as the 1950s and the 1970s, they were conducting experiments over the United States citizens without their knowledge, thinking they know everything, thinking they know all the final results, thinking that they know what was going to happen And I believe that they were just lying and this was a cover story, but they claimed to not have known what was going to happen. And this is why you can't just lay down and take what they're giving you. Here it is here. All the sources are cited. For those of you that don't believe in Wikipedia, everything is sourced. You can go back to the original source. We were doing biowarfare testing in the United States. It says here, bacteria was erroneously believed to be a non-pathogenic, and its reddish coloration was used in school experiments to track infections. They were infecting your children with this bacteria. I just told you all of the different things that this bacteria does to people. During the Cold War, it was used as a simulant in biological warfare testing by the U.S. military. Yes, we were doing biological warfare testing. The country that's going around telling everyone else not to make biological weapons, as recently as the 1950s, they were doing biological warfare testing. And they were studying in the field, this bacteria in the field as a substitute for another bacteria, which was being weaponized at the time. On the 26th and 27th of September 1950, the U.S. Navy conducted the secret experiment Operation Sea Spray, the one we just talked about, in which some of this red bacteria was bursting in balloons over San Francisco. The Navy later claimed the bacteria was harmless, but beginning in September 29th, 11 patients in a local hospital developed a very rare urinary tract infection, and one of the individuals died. Cases of pneumonia in San Francisco also increased after the release. And Nevin's son and grandson filed a lawsuit between 1981 and 1983. The grandson of the man that died lost the lawsuit. They said they were immune. They basically were granted immunity as the United States government to do what they want, and they found that the odds that he died from that bacteria were small. That's what they found. The bacteria was also combined with phenol and an anthrax simulant and sprayed across South Dorset by US and UK military scientists as part of DICE trials, which ran from 71 to 75. Since 1950, it's increased as a cause of human infection, with many strains resistant to multiple antibiotics. The first indications of problems with the flu vaccine produced by Chiron Corporation in 2004 involved this bacteria contamination. The same bacteria. Operation Sea Spray. 99 red balloons. There were other tests that were revealed during a Senate subcommittee hearings in 1977. We're going to look at the year 1977 in a book that came out talking about immunizations and how they cause illness. So the military had to reveal all of their other tests they were doing on the American people. So when we tell you NASA launching these bacteriological balloons over the heads of the people during the eclipse, that's a big deal. When we tell you that, it's not to create fear, it is the truth. This is what they were doing. They have no idea what this stuff is going to do to people. It says here, between 1949 and 69, open-air tests of biological agents were conducted 239 times. There's your 923. In 80 of those experiments, the Army said it used live bacteria that its researchers at the time thought were harmless. In the others, it used inert chemicals to simulate bacteria. They dispersed this same bacteria that made people sick in Panama City, Key West, Florida, with no known illnesses resulting, is what they say. They said they dispersed zinc cadmium sulfide over Minnesota in the 1950s. to see how far they would spread in the atmosphere. They were detected 1,000 miles away in New York State. Yet they said no illnesses were ever attributed to them as a result. Another bacteria, never shown to be harmful to people, right? This is what they thought about the red bacteria. But in fact, it was. It was released in San Francisco, New York, Washington, and along the Pennsylvania Turnpike, among other places. In 1966, the military released another bacillus. There was a Niger variant from Africa, also believed to be harmless, in the subway system by dropping light bulbs filled with the bacteria on the tracks in the stations in Midtown Manhattan. The bacteria were carried for miles through the subway system. Unbelievable. In 1965, which wasn't that long ago, they released more bacteria at Washington's National Airport and its Greyhound bus terminal. More than 130 passengers were exposed to the bacteria, traveling to 39 cities and 7 states in the 2 weeks following the mock attack. This is what our military is doing. Now let's get into the 1977 book that reveals that people were in fact afraid of vaccines. First-hand eyewitness testimony that the vaccines were the thing making people sick. In 1918, those who got the flu shot were the ones that contracted the flu. Those that did not get the deadly flu. This from a witness on the ground in 1918 in this 1977 publication by Eleonora McBean, PhD. This is unbelievable. Thanks to the subscriber that sent this to me. Those who were skeptical about these vaccinations, this has been going back decades. The skepticism and distrust of the creators of these vaccines. And in this chapter 2, and I'll leave a link in the description, the PhD goes on to talk about the Spanish influenza epidemic of 1918 and comes right out and says that it was caused by the vaccinations. Now, Eleonora also was an on-the-spot observer of the 1918 influenza epidemic, and she talks about her family not getting sick, even though they were going house to house helping people. Now, could they have been naturally immune? Absolutely, that's possible. But she is telling stories of many people who did not get the vaccine, who did not get sick. She talks about the military's involvement, about how all of this started with the soldiers. Now, this is not a point of contention. This is fact. That the Spanish flu of 1918, they're saying, started at Fort Dix, a military fort. This is where it started, and it just so happened to be on the path of the eclipse of 1918 was where that fort is. You've got to ask yourself, with all the genocide and all of this and these stories of genocide being repeated over and over again in shows like The Last Ship, where they're telling you that this is about genocide. And now we're seeing on the ground evidence from this woman. Now we're starting to see the truth. So I'm going to put a link to this in the description. It's way too much to read, but I wanted to get this to you guys. This was sent to me by a subscriber. This is a real book, 1977, from a PhD who happened to be alive during the epidemic of 1918 that killed, she's saying 20 million here, but new estimates say up to 50 million people worldwide were killed. So take a look at this, you guys. We need to piece together our own history because we're not being told the truth. And when this whole pandemic rolls out and they want to march everyone in to receive their vaccination, for which my guess is they will probably give you a mark to show that you've been vaccinated. which could be the mark of the beast. Take care and be safe, you guys.